I'm here today with my good friend Will Fullwood and our guest Annalisa Brunner, who is the author of The Nation Must Awake. And I'm looking forward to getting to talk about that. And as I was just saying, I've known Annalisa from Medium, and it's just a delight to have these conversations and get to know people better. And so, yeah, I'll leave it to you, Annalisa, to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Walter and Will. I'm very pleased to be with you here today. I have joined once or twice, maybe, to just kind of get the format down and been inspired and informed. And so I appreciate that. I have to say one thing. I am introduced as the author of The Nation Must Awake. That's the formal title, and authorship is attributed to me, but on the cover of the book, you'll see a name, Mary Elizabeth Jones Parrish. I am her representative because she was my great grandmother and a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. Quite obviously, she's no longer with us. So when the book came out in 2021, at the centennial of the 1921 date of the catastrophe, I participated with Trinity University Press in that republication of her original work, and I contributed the afterward. And so the newer edition is a tripart work. The introduction and the front of book matter was written by noted historians Dr. Scott Ellsworth and Dr. John Hope Franklin, and for Dr. Franklin posthumously. And so they introduced the topics, of course, because Dr. Ellsworth is originally from Tulsa and did his doctoral work on the Tulsa Race Massacre. And he used very extensively my great grandmother's original primary source, which was published around 1923 originally. And so it did come out, it wasn't just a manuscript, it did come out in book form at that time. And so the 2021 was a republication, and Dr. Franklin himself was the son of Buck Colbert Franklin, who was also a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. He was a prominent attorney in the community of Greenwood / Black Wall Street, and he was the one who brought the case for the survivors and those businesses and homeowners who had lost so much in that great catastrophe to the city to try to, acquire recompense. That was never given. Justice was not served in that regard. However, he was able to stave off the land development aspirations that wanted to make it impossible for the residents who had suffered such a tragic loss to rebuild. And so his work was instrumental in that particular and very important decision. But as I said, there wasn't, there has never been
Mhm.
justice, either financially or morally, for what was done. And just earlier early last year, January of last year, the Department of Justice issued issued the first, I shouldn't say its first, the first high level investigation, examination, and analysis of what happened over 100 years ago. This year marks the 105th anniversary, and on the eve of that anniversary, that tragic anniversary, I sent you a note, Walter, to say that 76 more bodies have been exhumed in
Mhm.
the Mass Graves Initiative under the direction of Dr. Ellsworth, who was instrumental in preparing the front matter for our book. And they are continuing on their efforts to identify those lost people in those mass graves that have lain there all this time. A couple of years ago, the very first identification through DNA analysis methods was identified Mr. C.L. Daniel, who was a World War I veteran, and he met his end on his way home to be reunited with his mother in Georgia. On a stop in Tulsa, he fell victim, and he was the first to be identified. And so this is again a momentous time. progress continues to be made. Movement toward us ultimate justice
Mhm.
continues to be pushed forward. And so this is a timely topic. Once again, it continues to recur.
Oh, and thanks for that introduction, and we can give more visibility to that piece of history that you're telling us about. So I really appreciate that. I'll turn over to Will to have some responses and comments.
Sure. Annalisa, thank you so much for that history and sharing with us. Wow,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
very impactful.
yes,
And you know, so many things are going through my mind. One thing that kind of went through my mind is I recently actually watched some reactors. They're called Everyday Negroes on YouTube, and they were watching Lovecraft Country, which does depict the Tulsa Race Massacre in it. And I was struck by their responses, particularly the fact that they seem completely ignorant of that history. Like many people, right? When you know,
yeah.
these shows came out, right, that were starting to depict, the massacre, and then people were like, "Oh, I thought this was just fiction," but no, this is a depiction of a real historical event and, where people were murdered, and, it just goes to show, that if we don't keep these histories alive, then no one else is going. Like, I mean, the plan is to make sure that history is transformed, that it's forgotten, that it's suppressed, and particularly in the case of Black Americans, that our stories are shredded, and transformed into something that can be used oftentimes as a weapon against us. So, yeah, it was just all of that was kind of going through my mind. I found it so sad when I saw
Yeah.
those kids reacting to that, and I wrote my little comment in the YouTube comments, just being like, "Hey, like, yes, this happened. Yes, you
Mhm.
should learn more about it. No, there was never any exactly what Annalisa just said. No, like justice was not served, despite all the amazing efforts of everyone involved who you listed. And I followed that closely as a lawyer myself, trying to follow this his cases and the work that he was doing. So, I applaud him and everyone else involved in these efforts, including you, Annalisa, and that's where I'm at for the beginning of this.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your diligence and your attention to this. I just want to mention another show, which was Regina King's Watchmen,
Yes.
that brought that was really, and Dr. Ellsworth will corroborate this opinion, was really instrumental in reintroducing this topic into the public imagination because it had been forgotten, but at another level, deliberately suppressed, as you mentioned, Well. So,
Yeah.
yes, it interesting that media can be so important and impactful, in these preservations and in tellings and interpretations that are, more attuned to truthfulness.
Mm,
Yeah, these atrocities, and I mean, we're seeing a parallel. I mean, they're exhuming the bodies in the Zorro Ranch. Well, I guess they're not, but there's investigations ongoing about the potential for bodies being down there too. And I keep saying when I interview candidates, it's like we teach American history like it's the redacted Epstein files. We don't tell people about these atrocities, and it's yeah. I mean, the first time the Tulsa race massacre came to my attention, it was probably about 5 years ago through deliberately doing my own research on racism, reading WB, starting with WB Du Bois and just ongoing the threads start to connect. And it's only when you start to examine these true atrocities that are deliberately covered up, and the sequence of them, and you see just how there is so many examples of that throughout our entire history is based on that. It's like we've been handing a document that's got all these holes punched in it, and you kind of have to read between the lines and try to, at some point, your curious mind stops accepting this reality that you're presented with. And you say, well, these things don't make sense because so much of what we tell kids in schools doesn't make sense. And then as a curious kid in school, that leads to punishment, makes you resentful of education, which is probably a secondary cause because they want you to be angry all the time because not you realize that nothing they're telling you is true. So I guess, yeah, the unaddressed crimes of history. We know we live in this era where our children have these mental they live in a mental health crisis. We talk about that all the time. And then they try to present it as if they are saving the kids by not telling them the truth, which is completely unfounded. I guess I'm giving you a lot that you can respond to. We have this kind of free flowing conversation. So, Annalisa, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Very interesting that you should talk about, the exhumation of bodies and then more literal, more figuratively buried history, if you will, and the way that sometimes we tend as human beings to export the culpability for evil onto another body or scapegoat or whatever the case might be. And I think that we're seeing that quite a bit when we keep referencing foreign atrocities,
Mm,
when we're grasping right now for a public understanding of what's happening in our country right now. That's rather a convenient avoidance behavior because we don't have really to reach very far to understand um, the roots of violence, the roots of extreme ethno supremacy ideology, and how these kinds of uh, extremist views um, devolve into violence very very easily, and it's sometimes it can be um, a the precipitating event can be something major, but it can be something also minor that sets off something that has been long simmering. And that
mm,
certainly was the case with Tulsa. There was a social catalyst, but there was also um, a, an economic incentive. And when those two things marry, it really doesn't take very much for people to use an event which was the stepping on of the foot of a young woman by a young man in an elevator, to use that as a pretext to carry out, things that were predetermined to take place anyway.
mm,
And I think that one of the interesting things that we fail to do, just as people, we don't w- we don't think about the psychological patterns of these behaviors, and I think that that's part of the missing critical thinking um, puzzle that
mm,
public education kind of robs people of, and with these things about not telling children because ostensibly, but it's just an excuse to protect them. That's completely antithetical to human growth, human development, and the natural upwelling of empathy.
mm,
And we have, as a society, we're going so far as to have having
mhm,
to listen to people who have a megaphone in the country
mhm,
saying empathy is actually it's a sin. We have some extremist religious figures saying that. We have, the Musk man saying that, empathy is the primary weakness of Western civilization. You know, atrocities of any magnitude are available for public for human participation when you have these kinds of ideologies being spouted. And so, I think that we are obligated to keep our eye on the prize of truth. And it is uncomfortable, you know,
mhm,
that song that's from Sinners, the truth hurts, Daddy, so I lied to you. Well, the
mhm,
truth hurts, so we lied to ourselves. And and as this is one of my favorite things. My children are always admonishing me. Dostoevsky says, in the Brothers Karamazov, you can lie to others, but when you lie to yourself, it precludes your ability for love. It's
mhm,
basically one of the huge messages that I that resonates in my mind over and over and over again. And so without truth, how do we relate to one another um, as human
Yeah.
beings? How do we relate to ourselves as honest assessors of our own internal workings that permit us to be, in community with others and I hate this word, an authentic way, but in a way that is truthful and in a way that prepares us to receive what others are giving of their own authentic selves, without the pretense, without the fancy labels and the things that we use to
Mhm.
shield that most vulnerable kernel inside of us that is, vulnerable, but also the only way that we can truly, be in community.
Mm. Oh, let me just say I love you, Annalisa. I think this is
True.
fantastic, and not just your words, but your demeanor and your manner of expressing these things, and it's just sort of like I mean, everything now it's just this constant assault of these tirades and all the things that are designed to manipulate us, and I spend all my time just trying to I'd alternate between screaming at people that just try to get attention somewhere, and I just am really appreciative right now of listening to your way of expressing these thoughts. They parallel a lot of the thoughts I have, but in your way of expressing them, that this is kinda calm and inevitable way of expressing these things. It's making me feel pretty emotional, it's giving me some hope. So, just thank you again for your time. I'll turn
Thank
it back over
you.
to Will.
Yeah, I feel this exact same way, a kindred spirit, Annalisa, somebody who has taken on a value of truth, something that is somewhat rare, I would say, in the United States of America right now, as
Oh,
this place has clearly been built on a foundation of lies and is dedicated to perpetuating those lies. No matter how many people have to fall by the
yeah.
wayside. And so yeah, it's really good to see someone, standing up for truth, standing up for because there's no bigger battle, in my opinion, than the battle for truth. If we lose that, then we lose everything. So, yeah, as a longtime educator myself, that's another way that I came to understand that reality. I've talked to Walter in the past about mentoring teachers and how, I would talk to them about their role in our society and that it doesn't just um it's not just incorporated within their classroom, right? Like it extends far beyond that, into the very minds that we're trying to inspire that kind of curiosity, as you mentioned earlier, Walter, about the world around them. And that's in the face of a system that demands that you extinguish your curiosity for many of the most important subjects, including race, including our politics and of this country's history and some of the psychological patterns, Annalisa, that you mentioned earlier, that this country has reinforced through the generations, severing the empathetic connection between each other, um, and doing that purposefully, intentionally, maliciously,
Mm,
and it's robbed people of the ability to even imagine that they can actually choose their values, that they could actually choose truth, that they could actually choose kindness, that they could actually choose community, that they
mm,
could actually choose love. And that's kind of the foundation of my work, right? Is to try to show people that they've been robbed of that choice and to give it back to them. Um, and and I want to be clear that this isn't about taking away agency from anyone. This isn't about taking away accountability from anyone, responsibility for anyone. And that's why I call it a choice, right? Because people still need to decide, where are you standing here? Are you standing on the side of humanity, of human flourishing, of creating an environment where life can actually thrive, where people can grow and learn, and where, like we said earlier, curiosity can flourish? Is that the kind of environment that you want? And if so, what are your values that are going to lead you to act in a way that's going to help bring about the creation of such an environment? Um, and yeah, unfortunately, in our society today, what we have instead is a lot of people not thinking about that whatsoever. We have a lot of people thinking about their own survival, because they've been put into a survivalist mentality. And I'm not excluding myself from that either. Like this is personal experience here, born and raised in Durham, North Carolina, and having been through the ringer a bit here in these decades that I've been alive, I was constantly faced with that, right? Faced with leaning, kind of having to choose between my own survival and trying to create within this toxic environment that I could clearly see, something good. And oftentimes trying to create that meant, um, shaving little parts of myself away,
Mm,
pushing little parts of myself
mhm,
down, twisting myself into a little bit of a pretzel, various different manipulations, mental, spiritual, and physical, to try to help people, and try to inspire people and try to give people hope and try to teach people love. It had a cost,
mhm,
and so I try to keep in mind that that's what people are going through, and that there are not very many environments or catalysts for people to open their minds and hearts. And so that's why that's the nature of my work, right? Is to create more of those moments, to turn myself into hopefully a beacon and something um, that can bring people out of their malaise, that has been artificially created for them, the blanket with spikes on it. You know what I mean? I want them to take, it's the false sense of security is what I'm
mhm,
saying there,
mhm,
that people hold on to, these
mm,
ideologies that they've just been indoctrinated into over time that are not even their true, as Annalisa said, even though you don't like it, I think it's a useful way of describing it, their true authentic selves. Like it's not who they are. Who we are is who we choose to be, not who someone chooses us to be. And a lot of people don't know the difference between that because they've never been told. That is like our reality. And I just want to tell enough people and see whether that makes a difference. You know what I mean? And in my experience, it does make a difference. When people have knowledge that they were lied to, that they were betrayed, by their country, by the people around them who maybe through no fault of their own, just because of the environment. It takes some time to grieve that, to go
mhm,
through the emotions that come along with no one having, taken you aside and being like, "Hey, this is what it really is. Okay, this is
mhm.
like the truth." And so, yeah, I just wanna give people a chance to go through that process and then decide, and whatever people decide is up to them. I'm not trying to control people, I'm not trying to even suggest that they do decide something specific. Of course, even though I do believe that there is something that people should choose, that is not, the nature of the work. The nature of the work is try to give people freedom, try to give people true freedom, try to give people true access to power even in this environment that is demanding that they suppress themselves, that they, stay in ignorance. So yeah, that's the work that I do, and, this conversation reminds me again of how important it is. So thank you.
Well, what I would say, since you touch on the topic of education, teaching, truth, things of this nature, we know that, through education, uh, a malevolent force, if you will, can shape, the future of a civilization through its manipulations of curricula, textbooks, things of this nature, things that we're actually seeing. We can
Yes.
hark back to the early '90s with this contract with America thing, where they started with telling, their reactionary forces at the very lowest levels of community organizing run for school board, and
Yes.
that's what they did. And so, you can see from something like that, that this has been a concerted effort, very well organized,
Yeah.
and especially very well financed over time. And so what we see today is not spontaneous, it was planned. And, and I also think this notion that everything is a conspiracy theory is, another ploy that's put on people to help shut people up when they talk about pattern recognition of certain kinds of unpleasant or malevolent things within a society that are allowed to flourish in darkness. And
Yeah.
so, shining a light on something is not a conspiracy theory, and application of critical thinking, uh, you know, um, uh, 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 and I think empirical pattern recognition and things of this nature, uh, these are things should be attended to. When we think about this kind of messaging that's coming out now, diminishing the value that people hold for
Yeah.
educational
Yeah.
attainment. This is it's another attack. It's an assault on people's ability to advance themselves. We've long known that that was the ladder that was required for people to climb onto to make any kind of social progress. We also know that teachers are one of the groups within society that are pivotal to the education of young people, and the teaching profession has been under assault.
Mhm.
You know, teachers are not paid enough; they're not highly valued. These kinds of things. No society with the kinds of resources that we have should have teachers who should have that profession be so ill valued, ill financed,
Yeah.
and um, you know, uh, at some point, they're degrading some of the requirements that are going to be needed because
Mhm.
the problem has been created. People are exiting the profession, and the solution is going to be something for profit and something that has that degrades the professionalism
Mhm.
of people in that career. And so these things do all work together. There's no need to say dismiss it and say you're afraid that somebody's going to say you're a conspiracy theorist and things of this nature. I mean, we I think have to practice shutting out some of the noise and not responding to every single provocation,
Mhm.
because it is a provocation when you're thinking about people who hold the power and you're trying to get some. They have many more tools at their disposal. They have the public airways. They have, you know, um, you know, well-financed PR campaigns. I mean, some of the things that have um, eh, eh, seeped into the public consciousness have been long-term public relations
Mhm.
campaigns, and they have not been effectively countered either through lack of resources, but I think more important, and more to the point, through lack of imagination.
Mhm.
And I think that we're so easy to allow other people to determine reactively what the narrative is, and what the kernel of concern should be about all these things. But that's really not what's happening. We are subject to the sleight of hand. We have this charlatan up here who peddles
Mhm.
in lies, and but there while we're being mad about the lies, there are things going on behind the scenes that are affecting
Yeah.
the structure of the society in which we find ourselves, and in which we are trying to do more than eke out a living. And so, as an example, I offer this, that kind of brings all of these things together, and again harks back to the story that I am continually telling as I try to, reassert my ancestors' legacy, and what she meant to, this dialogue. Um, my great grandmother was in her 30s when she survived the massacre. She had a young daughter of 7 years old, who was my paternal grandmother. My great grandmother went on after the massacre to teach in a public high school in Muskogee, and then she ended up in, I think, 1930, being hired at Langston University, the farthest west HBCU in the country, the only one in Oklahoma, as a lecturer. And clearly she valued education. Her daughter, my grandmother, graduated from Langston University and became a teacher. My grandfather, the man she married, also graduated from Langston University and became a teacher. However, they couldn't make a living in those professions at the time. And so my grandfather enlisted, although he had a college degree, he officership was not available to him coming out of Oklahoma at that time. He enlisted and he was killed in the Pacific Theater. He died in what was then called Burma, um, during the final years of the war, as a matter of fact. That destabilized our family. His widow, my grandmother, left from Oklahoma and went to San Francisco, where I was born. She took the teacher's exam, performed extremely well. However, she didn't go to the schools that were, accepted as being, good enough, if you will. And so she was hired by the San Francisco Unified School District, despite performing at the top of the cohort, as a janitor. And so, although she had a college degree, as did her late husband, my grandfather, he died as an enlisted person, and she worked, until her retirement as a janitor. And so, these things have historical and generational repercussions. I mean, what happens when my father was time for him to go to college? He went,
Mm.
but then, he runs out of money and she can't help him. His brother, he went, he runs out of money and she can't help him. So these are the things that when people devalue education,
Mhm.
these are the stories that people should understand. It's so very valuable that people want to um, uh, make it unavailable to you.
Mhm.
They're not telling their children don't go to college. They're
Mhm.
telling you your children don't go to
Yeah.
college. This is, I mean, how disingenuous, but also um, how evil, and you must be able to perceive through all of this rhetoric, what the true meaning is, what the true direction is,
Mhm.
and you get that from a big picture, long range historical view on things and how all of these pieces fit together. I mean, now we understand that all of this technology in schools, can sometimes uh, act as a barrier to true learning and to deep learning and deep.
Mhm.
And what's happening in the most exclusive schools, they're removing some of this technology, but it's okay for you and your children. Finland, who
Mm.
performs at the top of the OECD countries year after year after year, you know, and they are a highly, a highly sophisticated technological society. They're starting to look at some other ways of learning because as
Yeah.
these things continue to be studied, and there's a longer and longer history to look at, we understand. Ah, it is the humanities that are important.
Mhm.
Will, your point. The ability to be human, the ability to discern the truth when there's all manner of things going on to distract you and to that are competing for your attention. So this is really a battlefield, and it has taken on new dimensions, but it's still the same old game.
Mhm.
And so, I urge people, don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. And my son, he taught in Oakland public schools, and at the 8th grade level, he said those children are lost. They have no future
Mhm.
because they can hardly read, but more important, they can't reason and write.
Mhm.
And this the you talking about writing, Walter?
Mhm.
We came along at a time where, you didn't have to be a genius to even learn how to write well because the structure was there. That's how things were organized. Well, that has been changed,
Yes.
and that has been decimated because too many people like us who think a certain way were getting through. That is actively being worked against.
Mhm.
Let's be clear about that. And everything, they say past is prologue. Well, they learned a lot from what has happened. And they're like, "Oh no, we came through at certain times where the 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 slip was a little bit wider."
Mhm. Yes.
It's being deliberately narrowed. I beg people not to fall for it and cut off, their own nose, to cut off, shoot themselves in the foot. And what I think is, with the continuing the upward spiraling costs of education, people are going to have to look abroad. My
Yes.
son's getting his MPH right now in London for
Yeah.
a quarter of what he would pay here, even
Yes.
considering living expenses and travel back.
Mm.
We must expand our imagination about what it means. You want to gatekeep those institutions? Fine. Let's organize and go elsewhere
Mhm.
until they, figure out a way to attack that. Oh, those degrees are no longer going to be accepted here, or whatever the case might be. We are constantly going to have to be using,
Yeah.
our imagination and our, resourcefulness and our cleverness to do
Mhm.
something different and to stop getting caught up with, oh, can you believe they're doing this?
Yeah. I got two quick things to say about that because you covered something that I touched on recently. I wrote an article about how the gatekeeper system in publishing, it stops important voices from being heard. And I was writing this complaint, and people were saying, "Well, you seem to have done well." And I'm like, "It's not about me. I had advantages that allowed me to get around." We have to abandon this ideology that it's okay because I managed to get around. The ideology needs to be the obstacles have to come down. And once you recognize the obstacle, whether you get past or not, but it's interesting how so many people, they would respond to my article and their approach was, "Well, why are you even mentioning it? Because you got around that thing." And it's like, why have you been indoctrinated with this belief that if one or two people can get around an obstacle, then the obstacle is not a problem? We have to knock it down. But one other thing you wanted, as you were talking, I wrote down, we've all been coerced into underestimating the ingenuity of the corrupt. And I think that's something that we have to start thinking about. Like a regular, honest person, like Will was saying, economic, I'm just trying to get through my day. My energy is based on this. You have a certain level of ingenuity. But then you see these corrupt people who have maybe murdered somebody. Now the energy they're willing to put into hiding that body, into covering up their crimes, it's something we can't even comprehend. Like rational, reasonable people can't even comprehend the ingenuity of the corrupt. And it's to the extent, they will completely rewrite history. They will completely corrupt our educational system. And I think we haven't made a formal study of this, probably by design, because of the fact that the corrupt have erased our history, so we don't even recognize how corrupt true corruption is. We're getting a blink of it. We're seeing it all around us. There's such a tirade or a deluge of it today. It's just constant corruption. But even where we're sitting right now, the reality of what crimes these people have committed, I think it would make us sick. I don't think we're even at a point where we can absorb all these atrocities yet. And so just because they'll dismiss you. And I'm already seeing it. It's like every election cycle, they surprise me again. I've been interviewing these wonderful candidates, and I'm just like, these people are amazing. And then I'm seeing now the attack ads from the Republicans calling them unserious, and they're using all these. And it's just like, even now, even after all I've seen, their tactics astonish me. And I guess I'm just not prepared yet to handle
Well,
them.
you know, these investigations that are being stalled and,
Yeah.
and blocked and all that here, but Europe's not taking this sitting down. And I'm not holding Europe blameless for its own issues. But Poland is doing a lot. France is actually doing something because what they I think what they may have realized is there's no appeasing a personality like this.
Mm,
There's no success in that kind of approach, and they are on the hook for their own survival, and so they have decided that it is time
mm,
for them to investigate these files that have battered around here. I mean, we can tell that there's been an erosion in the psychology of the public where people are not rising up when something this egregious
Yes.
and clearly morally bankrupt has gone on, and you have not only complacency but certain people actually defending the behaviors that are at the root of these files. This is an inflection point. And if we're not strong enough to do it, we do have to we those of us in certain uh who have a certain position towards society, we have to ask for help. With that said, and although this institution has its own problems and issues, and also it is being decimated by withholding of funding. I have written to the UN several times to try to and have submitted formal complaints, and something that I have a person who I've been in contact with in Montreal. He's the special rapporteur, the UN special rapporteur for truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-recurrence. They've written to this government 2 or 3 times, about the decimation of, um, DEI efforts, which have been, as we know, DEI, CRT, wokeness. This has all been vilified in the minds of the public, but we know that that happens because it's making progress toward us a more just society, a society in which we would all find more comfort, um, and joy. But the issue is these will not do anything right now, but all of this documentation and all of this work, it will eventually make a difference. And that's what we have to keep our eye on in order to remain energized and not to give up, which is which would serve, our masters
Mhm.
and their nefarious machinations, um, just fine. And so, you know, I think every step that we take, every piece of work that we do in the right direction, it energizes us. So it's not
Mhm.
just ultimately for the cause;
Mhm.
it's also to give ourselves a little bit of oomph
Mhm.
to keep up to get up and continue you know, our own drum beat for righteousness, because these things cannot remain unanswered, and us have a chance to go forward as a productive and humanity based civilization. Yes, they're always talking about the civilization is under attack. It is under attack, but they keep pointing out the wrong villains.
Mm. Mm.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I like what you said there about a couple things. First, that you kind of implicated something that I try to communicate often, which is that there's not one right way to fight for justice, to fight
Mhm.
for truth. Everyone has something that they can bring to the table. And when people are blind to that, to what they
Mhm.
can bring to the fight, it's typically because they haven't decided to fight. That is the typical issue. And so, um, people who've decided to fight, like my man Walter here, Walter found out what to do. You know, like Walter was once he decided, he was like, let me learn, let me read, let me listen, let me find out what I need to do in order to create a better world. I see that that happens when people decide one way or the other, right? If you decide, okay, I'm actually going to remain willfully ignorant in the face of this.
Mm.
If you decide that, then you're going to act on that. You're going to stop making sure that you have access to media that would actually implicate the truth. You're going to make sure that you don't have meaningful conversations in your social circles and in your professional lives, and I had a colleague. I no longer work for the community college in which I was teaching mathematics, which was my last kind of official job here. And I had a colleague come up to me before a full, meeting with the faculty, and I'm not exaggerating here, y'all. Like this man, he literally called himself willfully ignorant and laughed about it to me. He laughed at his own decision to be willfully ignorant, and I don't know what he expected from me or why he was revealing this to me, except for, people like throughout my entire life, like revealing to me their shameful secrets. I don't know
Mhm.
what that's about exactly. I don't know why I'm some kind of dowsing rod or something for their shame, but people like to use me for confession for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And yeah, that one just turned my stomach, particularly because I'm just like, just I don't know how people could exist like that. I don't know how people can, it's beyond the scope of my imagination. I find myself to be have a pretty expansive one, but when it comes to people who choose these things, who choose evil really, who choose to embrace it, yeah, I have realized that it's not necessarily the best use of my time to try to understand the machinations of evil in terms of the decision making of these people. What's I feel like we have to put those people to the side once we know what they've decided, and just categorize them as the enemy, as a barrier that we need to overcome, not as anything else, And for me, that's been really helpful in terms of making sure that I maintain that hope and that spirit that you were talking about, Annalisa, and also by empowering me in the work that I'm doing to help people who still have a chance to make the right decision if they were just given that opportunity, right? In this environment where that opportunity is being curtailed at every angle. So I love what you said about imagination and creativity and what we need to do. That is the true basis for the work that I'm committing myself to for the rest of my life. I think that people want to imagine that fighting against this ideology and this system and this ignorance and this evil and malevolence, I think that people have this idea of what it looks like. There's
Mhm.
already something that has been imagined about it, and unfortunately, even that thing that has been imagined is an implant.
Mhm.
It is not real, and the real fight, is something that's not so pretty, something that's not so idealized, something that's not so public oftentimes,
Mhm.
and that's the difficult work that we have to do now, and for me, it means creating space and grace for conversations on the subject of race so that people can decondition themselves from this ideology so that it no longer rules their imagination. So it no longer creates these artificial boundaries whereby people will no longer be able to create the kind of world that Annalisa is talking about, one that's closer to a just world, a world that values truth, a world that values education, a world that values human life and our ability to live healthy lives, right? That values the environment and creating an environment that we're living in harmony with as part of it. There are, and again, just to reinforce, what you said, Annalisa, I'm moving to France, in just over 2 months, and it's not like France is some perfect country, some utopia or something, but there's one thing that I'll say about it that distinguishes it from this country, which is that this country has transparently chosen to create policies, laws, and social cultural dynamics that do not value each person who is a resident of this country as a human being. And it is obvious, especially now, where we have tens of thousands of people in concentration camps across this nation
Mm.
with a long legacy and history of just abject murder by our government, human experimentation, Just
Mm.
policies of torture, uh, just the way that we treat girls and women and children in this country, the lack of value we place on their lives, on their growth. Um, it is it is disturbing, you know? And if you go over to France, you're not gonna see that. Like, you're literally not going to see it anywhere
Mhm.
because they have, at a fundamental level, decided that every person is a human being, even if they don't necessarily value every person the same through their policy. There is a baseline
Mhm.
there that
Yeah,
we are going to respect people's humanity.
yeah. Well, I I wrote this some time ago, and I thought, oh gosh, that pretty much is it. You know, when you talk about what we've been indoctrinated with, sometimes I find that when we speak in in cliches and platitudes instead of actually. And sometimes it's just through a matter of convenience. It's quick,
Mm.
it's easy. But sometimes I think deep meaning is lost, and so for so many years and through in through many different circumstances. We're always talking about the original sin of this country. The original sin of this country is slavery and this and that. But what does that really mean?
Mhm.
In my mind, what it actually means, the meaning is as a society, this country chose profit over humanity. In the broadest sense, that is what happened. It chose profit over humanity. And our continual worship of profit
Mhm.
is has brought us to this day and continues to degrade and sicken our lives. But I just think that sometimes we narrow the concepts too much. But in the broadest sense, the original sin is exemplified in that expression, profit over humanity. And that's something that people can wrap their minds around because it's irrefutable, and it also opens people's possibilities to thinking about it in a way that's broadly applicable to everyone. Because ultimately we all do pay for this.
Mhm.
We all do pay for this.
And
And
Annalisa, everyone knows they're paying, okay?
yeah, they
Somewhere,
do. They do. And you see,
somewhere.
but the thing is that one of the things is that people are herded into belief systems
Mhm.
that say that, but whatever I'm suffering is worth it because what I'm getting is zero,
Yeah.
you know? And truthfully speaking, all of these people searching for meaning, getting into
Yeah.
these cults and this extreme religiosity and all of these other kinds of things, that's because they traded something. They traded some part of their humanity to belong to this system that they've been convinced is good for them
Yeah.
or is giving them something. But it's all it's doing is it's stripping them of.
Strangling them, I was gonna say.
They made a deal with it's a deal with the devil. You
It
gave
is
up
a
your
deal with the
soul,
devil. It is a
and
deal
you
with
got
the devil.
nothing for it.
And you have people, you know, over the history of, immigration to this country. It's like, okay, we 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 gave up our culture, our sense of belonging somewhere to where we're from for this great sense of, what we call in this country whiteness. People gave up their Irishness. They gave up their Germanness. They gave up, their Swedishness or their whatever. That's what they gave up. And now when they feel like, oh, why is somebody else's culture being celebrated? You and this idea that, there is no white culture. Well, there's culture, but white is like black. Black doesn't describe people's skin color. White doesn't describe your skin color. White describes this American ideology that has been, it's not just in America, but it is definitely part of American hegemony But you do have a culture, but you have rejected it because you thought that there was something newer and shinier to hold on to instead of,
Mm.
something that grounded you in history and humanity. These are difficult conversations, but these are things that people need to contemplate. I don't know what the answer is,
Yeah.
but people need to contemplate these things. And in the academic setting is where people should be free to say these kinds of
Mhm.
things, and to debate about them
Yeah.
in a respectful yet truthful way, because you know we're all fallible. We are human beings, and that is by definition a part of our existence. And so, this need to avoid humiliation at all costs. Oh, to
Oh,
predict, project this feeling, this image of infallibility and all this stuff. You know, it turns out to be unproductive.
Yeah,
It
it's one of the
really.
most problematic
oh,
developments
we're closing. Are we
in.
still there? Did we freeze up? I think you guys froze up on me.
Oh,
Oh
we're
no.
here, Walter.
I
Can
wanted to
you hear us?
close out. So hopefully, oh, there you are. You're back.
Uh,
Maybe it was me that froze up.
yeah.
Uh, oh, this we're at the end of our. We're getting close to the end of our time. I wanted to. This has been just my great privilege, Annalisa. Thank you so much for coming here. I'm feeling just. I don't know the way you talked about things. I'm gonna have to listen to this again. It's like absorbing a poem. I need a little bit more time to unpack a lot of the things you said, and I think that's wonderful, and that's a great gift. So thank you. Do you have a copy of your book? Or the
I
book,
do.
"The Nation Must Awake to Hold Up"? There we
Yeah,
go.
here we are. The nation must awake. The art is fantastic if you see it up close. It's very beautiful. And there is my great grandmother's name, Mary E. Jones Parrish, and my name is on the back cover as having contributed
Excellent.
to the work by preparing the afterward. And so I strongly recommend it. Eyewitness account, oral history of survivors in the immediate aftermath, particularly important as we go into the season of remembrance, May 31st to June 1st of this year, and also the continuing work to excavate the graves and to identify those people who have been lost for over 100 years.
Mm, perfect. I'll include the link to that book in the replay when I publish that.
So much. Good time to
Well,
read.
yes.
Do
Closing
you have
thoughts?
any recommended source we should buy the book from?
I would go directly to Trinity University Press and bypass Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. When Walter, thank you as always for creating space for it. Like I just, these are so important. And meeting people like Annalisa, it reminds me that we're not alone in this battle out here, and it's so necessary, right? I'm sure all three of us have felt lonesome at times. um, you know, and yeah, it just gives me hope for the future that other people have seen through the BS and not only have seen through it, but have decided to take action. And yeah, that spirit is what we need. We need as much of it as possible. And yeah, I'm just proud to be a part of this with you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect. And is there a webpage too for you, Annalisa? Someplace where we can
Yes,
find you?
it's just AnnalisaBruner.com. No spaces, no dots, no nothing. AnnalisaBruner.com.
Perfect. Oh, well, I hope we get the chance to talk again. Like I said, I know you from your comments and writing on Medium, and this has just been so wonderful. I just really appreciate it. And just,
Thank you.
yeah, like I said, I feel empowered talking to people like you. So thank you.
Peace, everybody.
Yep.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you,
So much.
everybody. Much love to everybody. We'll talk to you the next time.
All righty. Bye-bye.